First of all, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here amongst the good people who are fighting the fight, keeping the pilot light on for those who will eventually join as our younger children realise how much they are getting shafted as well. So let's keep it going, folks. Just a wee introduction about why I'm speaking a little on energy. Obviously, I was an MP at Westminster, obviously a bit involved still in the independence campaign, but I used to be a contracts manager for BP, Shell, Statoil in Norway, Qatar Petroleum, and I specialise in FPSOs, which is floating platforms. It's basically a wee refinery sitting on a giant vessel with pliant wave support. This is my bit, subsea umbilicals and risers, flow lines. So it's a modern way of getting oil and gas from deeper and more aggressive waters. So we know how to do this. We know how to make the money and make it count. I was also a lecturer for 4 years at Aberdeen University for the master's degree in project management, specialising in contract law and risk. So I'm now an arbitrator. I work for NATO in Europe. I do dispute resolution, primarily suing the Americans. No, come on, my friends. No, my friends, our friends, the American people are our friends, and it's our governments that we've got issues with, 100%. And funny enough, when Rhys was talking about CCS, carbon capture and storage, we actually worked on the same project. Yeah. You were project manager. Where were you based, Rhys?
I was a project director for SSE's side of it in a joint venture with Shell.
Yeah, and I was the contracts manager for Shell. And one wee thing about this, it was carbon capture and storage was an initiative. And what we did was, there's three parts of it, and Rhys can talk in more detail about this, and we'll welcome questions on it. But the idea was, we thought that carbon capture was absolutely critical going forward. So we said, well, the best way to do it, what you do is you would end up getting a cluster of energy, heavy energy use facilities like power generation, etc. And what we chose initially was Longannet, but of course the buggers shut that down. So we had to move it up the coast, right up to northeast. There's a gas power station. So we moved it up there. And the idea was to gather the carbon capture. We had an existing facility at Shell using Goldeneye, which was a depleted reservoir. And we had the existing pipeline, and we were going to store it there. And it was by far the most economic and smartest way to do this. This was the winning initiative. The other alternative was White Rose in Yorkshire, that the government were looking for. It originally started as $1 billion with the government. When they cancelled it, as Rhys talked about, I was actually in Parliament and predicted that they were going to cancel it because their green energy deck at the time, you could tell, complete chancers. They have no interest other than making money for the corporations and the governments. That's all that matters. We don't count, which is why we're all here right now, to make sure that changes. Also, when I was at Westminster, I was involved in the generation of the government paper, decarbonisation in the UK, the critical role of carbon capture and storage, with Lord Oxburgh and Stuart Hazeldine, who was the only professor of carbon capture in the world at the time from Edinburgh University. Some absolutely brilliant people there, really phenomenal. I was not one of them. I would have to add. I was just in there shooting the breeze. No, I wasn't. I did my best, but these people were top level. One thing I want to comment, I quite deliberately did this because it's very thought-provoking. And we need a wee bit antagonism. We need a wee bit of stirring the pot. We need to mix it up a wee bit. I drove here today in quite a new Rolls Royce, okay? I know, not mine, I hasten to add, right? However, in a country where 1 in 4 children are in poverty, most of the trip was spent in contemplation of why the gap between rich and poor continues to get bigger, and why our children are suffering, and why the poverty is drilling our people into the ground, and what are we going to do about it? That's why the pilot light and the faith that we keep and the actions that we take are so important. So important. Don't underestimate what you do, each and every single one of you. Thank you for the pen. Thank you for the book and the donation to Prism, which we really appreciate. But What we do here is not to be underestimated. So what I want to talk about in energy is just go over some of these points, because that was an excellent presentation. I've seen some of Reese's stuff, highly technical. Fact check it. You'll find out he's talking absolute sense and we're on the same page. So an absolute pleasure, brilliant presentation. But rather than go back into it, I made some notes, I'll go over some points. This is all about unification. That's what we seek. Unification behind a single cause. You felt the same way as I did after the referendum in 2014. A hollowness inside. You were hollowed out. I have reason to believe we were cheated, but we'll come on to that another time. When these two people who saw what happened retire or are near their deathbeds, they'll probably come out and speak. But their pensions are at threat, because who you're up against is not to be underestimated. 77th Brigade, MI5, the British establishment, they know what they're doing. They're good at what they do, unfortunately for us. They will not let us go because we are the cash cow. So unification behind a single cause. So as you know, we in Prism are promoting Liberate Scotland. And one of the other reasons I brought this Rolls Royce with me, my brother, he sold a company for 50 million last year, right? So I came up with it, and I just want to put this out there. We have contacts, we have funding, and Liberate Scotland intends to battle the 2026 elections. And we have 5 figures saved already, and it's not small 5 figures. We are heading towards 6 figures of a battle fund that we will use to support independentistas who wish to fight as a single independentista anywhere in Scotland. And all we ask from the wider Yes group, the political parties have their own dark arts to perform, and we've seen it and we understand it. Another reason why a lot of us are no longer members of political parties, myself included. But we need to liberate. We need the unification that we saw in the Yes movement that made us an unstoppable force. And all we want is support for this initiative in whatever. If you're not a political party, you don't need to get involved in the political side of it. If you deliver one leaflet, I will thank you for your efforts, and the people of Scotland will thank you for your efforts. Anything you can do in unity. I am highly critical, as you well know. Some of you will be well aware of the SNP and the political situation we're in at the moment. That is not to say that I will not bury the hatchet, because we have to, for the benefit of us, but more importantly our children and our children's children. So that's a small plea for unification. On to what Rhys was talking about. Climate change. I am a sceptic. However, is climate change real? Yes. Are we contributing? Yes. There are 4 aspects of it: green, renewable, clean and sustainable energies. Check out Professor Patrick Moore on YouTube. For me, renewable is definable. Is that technically we know what renewable energy is. Clean, we know what clean energy is. It's not exactly clean, but it's clean enough, or clean air. And sustainable. These are definable terms. Green isn't. Green is a marketing term. Green has been put out there to sell us basically higher electricity prices than we should be paying. So, and this is one of the things we talked about, knowing these audiences and knowing some of you good people. This is not your first rodeo. You've had apples off this cart before. So let's not pretend it's anything other than a battle for our children's future. Oil. 96.5% of the oil known reserves exist in the UKCS, the United Kingdom continental shelf, 96.5% of which is in Scottish waters. There's no refinery here, but even last year when we did have a refinery in Scotland, and even with all the refineries in England, 80% of the oil is exported and refined abroad. Okay? So why? Well, what we need, I worked in the most advanced refinery in UK, which was the Humber refinery for what was Phillips 66. And it makes coke, not the kind you'll find in the schemes through poverty, but the kind of coke that actually is a byproduct of the oil and gas industry and extremely valuable. What we need Ravenscraig needed so much. Ravenscraig, that's another one. Bathgate no more, Ravenscraig, well, it just goes on and on. The latest one's Grangemouth. It was an older refinery. It needed a massive investment for upgrade. Losing it, there's a way we can get back quickly, because this is about greed in the Freeports. If you're not supporting the anti-Freeport movement, because they're stealing again our future, and they're deleting the rights of our workers and deleting the power that is in our hands. We have to do something about that, and that's where we're interested from a litigation perspective of what we can do. We know we've got 65% of the gas. Interconnectors, something Rhys talked about. Interconnectors is direct current electricity over distance, because you don't lose as much as you would with an AC over the distance and the resistance. And it's how countries trade in electricity over distances. So if the wind is blowing in Scotland, we can sell our energy to anyone we're connected through an interconnected connector to where the wind is not blowing, because that's one of the cheapest ways of using energy. So we, as an independent state, will keep our interconnector with England, but we'll throw some other ones out there too, and we will be doing rather well. We'll make tens of billions out of it. What reserves do we have? The North Sea Transition Authority, or NSTA, say that the UK has 3.3 billion barrels, right? But it's not including what's off the west coast. And BP, I specialise in FPSOs, so how the oil developed in Great Britain. It started about 5 o'clock down about the Wash and down in the southeast of England. And what the Americans did, they came over and basically pushed a land rig into the shallows. And as technology continued, we went deeper, higher pressure, we could deal with higher sulfur. We developed the technologies, the cracker units, etc., to manage these systems and get into deeper and harsher waters. The last one I did was the replacement of the Schiehallion FPSO with the Glen Lyon, and this is Quad 204. The budget was 5 billion. My budget as subsea contracts manager was 1.7 billion. It will make 30 million a day for 35 years. That's what's at stake. That's why they won't let us go. And when I saw this in Shellhead, and you don't get this. See if you've got friends in the oil and gas industry. My wee nephew, Johnny, he works offshore. He says it's all running out. I said, is that right? What does Johnny do? Oh, he's a chef on the rigs. Is that right? Okay. Because when I was contracts manager for large projects, but as a consultant, I wasn't on the top floor. I didn't know what the break-even price or the lifting price was. The truth is being hidden, not just from you, but from even the professionals involved in the industry, unless you're trusted. I only got to know the true figures when I got to the top floor at Shell. And I will never be back, because when the carbon capture and storage, when the deal was signed with Shell, and a certain British Conservative government, backed up with the Lib Dems, came to sign the contract with us, I was not in the group photographs because I refused to take my yes lanyard off. So I will not be back. So that's the reality of it. And then what else is off the west coast? We've talked about getting to 12 o'clock. The Rockall Basin. Look at that sign out there on the Freeports Action Group. Resisting it. You can see that we have 65% of the sea area of the UKCS for 8.3% of the population, 1/3 of the land mass, 66% of the fish by landings, 96.5% of the oil. We should memorise this. 65% of the gas, 90% of the fresh water for 8.3% of the population. That's what's at stake, folks. And even an ex-Prime Minister once said, oh, you can't compare Britain to Norway. They're a small country, about 5.4 million people with all this oil. Oops. That's what's at stake, friends. That's what's at stake. So, and the Rockall Basin. And bear in mind, even that bit that Tony Blair tried to steal. You know, he tried to steal some of the Forties field. The bottom line is it goes against UNCLOS, United Nations Constitution and the Law of the Sea, which clearly sets out how a continental shelf is divided up based on geographical ownership. It's ours, you ain't keeping it. Pricing. We should be paying, Reece is right again, we should be paying less than half of what we pay. I did a recent analysis, and Russia is paying 15%. The Russians pay 15% of what we pay. Ukrainians, 16%. The Americans, half of what we pay. Norway sells most of its oil abroad, and it uses renewable energy. And I know Reece also supports this. Investment in research and development. Scotland, when I was working in oil and gas, we still have some of the greatest engineers and some of the greatest workforce. Everywhere you go, there are Scots working abroad in energy and engineering. Why? Because of the Scottish Enlightenment. We were educated. We put work, we had a work ethic, and we went out there. That is being deteriorated. Now, the Norwegians have taken over as a centre of excellence. And I was over working in Stavanger, working for Statoil. And we were looking at interconnectors. We were looking at direct power to shore and a whole bunch of stuff. That is what we need. We cannot compete with the low wages of China and India and the rising BRICS economies. We need to do what Germany did before they screwed it up by doubling their energy prices, which is focus on high-end engineering. And to do that, you need investment in Scotland for research and development, and the Brits ain't going to do that. Net zero is a nonsense. There's a guy called, you should check him out, Bjorn Longberg in the Copenhagen Consensus Centre. It's about 15% of the GDP of the EU needs to be spent every year to try and hit net zero. The GDP in the EU, that's about 3 trillion per year. No, it's madness. Is climate change real? We touched on it, yes. Do we contribute to it? Yes. But is it the problem it's purported to be or reported to be? No, in my opinion. And I could go into that. There's a PhD I started and I had to abandon because it changed what I found out. I was pro, and don't get me wrong, I'm pro what we currently do in the oil and gas industry. Minimise noxious emissions. Absolutely. Stop putting plastic in the sea. Common sense. Stop polluting. Most of the pollution comes from the developing world. And we've tried to impose all this green garbage on China and India. And here was what President Modi of India said. So let me get this straight. You've had an industrial revolution that the people of India and the people of China have not, that we seek. We want to increase the wealth of our people. You went through an industrial revolution. You created most of this mess. You've had the starters, you have the main course. Now it's we're joining for dessert, and you want us to split the bill? Is that what you're saying? So I'm with Modi on this one. And the bottom line is, who are we to deny a better life for our fellow human beings, the Chinese, the Indians, and any good soul on this planet? But how we do it, we should be incentivizing. Their technologies is advancing way ahead of ours now. But we can stay ahead if we invest in the right research and development, and we support these emerging nations to be more technically astute in terms of pollution. I lived in India for 3.5 years, built a bridge over the Ganges and a steel mill in some of the poorest parts of India. I have to admit, it was the thinnest I've ever been. Eating the local food, it was the shit yourself skinny diet, whether you like it or not. But reality bites, friends, reality bites. Your electricity is high because renewable energy is subsidized. And as the government, as Reece has pointed out, and you could go into this and look into why the subsidies, amongst other things, has resulted in 2 record-level issues. The first one is the energy company profits and payments and dividends to shareholders. Record high. What's also at a record high? The price the public pays in energy bills. This needs to be reversed. And only by independence, nothing less, can we control the mechanisms, the monetary and fiscal levers to run an economy. There's about 35 of them. The current council, that is the Scottish government, which is the big council, has a fraction of these powers and is unable to do so. We need to change that, friends. Oil and gas, there's at least 60 years for the known reserves, and that doesn't count the West Coast. And then there's, again, I'll refer to the Rockall Basin in that drawing. The outside, when I walked in the door, it hit me smack in the face. I thought, brilliant, for those that are fighting the free ports. The Rockall Basin, by being Scottish, extends our waters another 200 nautical miles beyond where it was. And that means that we get the Rockall Basin. When we go into the west of the North Sea, west of Shetland, it's not just oil and gas. There's the mineral rights. There's something called fire ice, okay, and it's crystallized methane. We have to map it in oil and gas, because when we drill for oil and gas, what happens with fire ice, crystallized methane? It sits in the seabed. You can take a grabber, pick it up with the grabber, but as the pressure decreases as you lift it up and the temperature rises, it turns to a gas again and you've got nothing left. But there is a way to harness this. But how do we know it's there and why have we mapped it? Because when we do directional drilling, we drill into the seabed, sometimes 2 kilometres down, where there's fire ice pockets. If we drill through these, the increased temperature destabilises the ground that the fire ice is on, because the fire ice turns to gas. And then it moves away and destabilises the drilling. We have the maps of where all the fire ice is. We know how valuable it is. So does the British government. Nobody's talking about it. I'm going to keep talking about it because that's also at stake. It's not just oil and gas, folks. It's all these other valuable mineral reserves. The price of a barrel of oil is $65. Brent crude has always been an extremely valuable mix. It's not what's used primarily for fuel, but it's always been one of the most valuable blends of oil and gas, of oil in the planet. Remains so and remains a benchmark for other oil and gas prices for very, very good reasons. So for me, when I look at what's been happening, I understand that we face an uphill battle in unification. It's very difficult to forgive some of the traitorous manoeuvres by those practicing the black arts, particularly in the parties that we supported, worked for, paid for, and walked as we were stabbed in the back. And I put down the current leadership of the SNP as traitors to the cause of independence. And having worked with many of them in the independence campaign, in fact, there was even one, Angus Robertson, the white paper, remember the white paper? Now, I counted out many of these people as friends because you're working together. And I thought, well, I'm going down there having managed big management teams delivering projects as Rees has. And I went down, well, this is not my game, this is politics. I was an accidental politician because we didn't think we were going to win Coatbridge now, did we? It was the safest seat in Britain. But anyway, I signed up for it. I just signed, and I'll tell you. I'd signed a contract with Saudi Aramco on the 1st of that month, 1st of May. 7th of May was the election. And you had to, when Saudi Aramco, the biggest oil and gas company in the world, come calling, you get one chance. So I signed the contract and sent it away, but I deliberately missed out some paperwork just in case, right? Just in case we were going to win it. We go and win it. And my wife, who's now my ex-wife, says, what are you doing? I said, that could be the last MP. This is the cause. This could free Scotland. I've got to do it. She says, and it was massive amounts of money, tax-free, all that kind of usual trappings. I went, no, I've got to do it. We're now divorced. Oh, well. But yeah, what are you going to do? So there's a price, and I was critical of even Joanna Cherry, who I really like and I rate very highly. And I want to put the record straight here. Joanna suffered a great deal for standing up for what was true. Do I still believe that she was misguided by trying to fight Brexit? Yes. But she did what she was told by Nicola, who I put the blame squarely on. Instead of, as Napoleon said, when your enemy's making a mistake, Do not interrupt them. But by God, we made some mistakes. It's land.